Its software as a service offering removes the need for hardware, productisation and capital expenditure. It has been adopted as core network infrastructure by more than 120 telecommunications companies worldwide and has more than 190,000 users and over 16 million of annualised recurring revenue. Today's conference is streamed using the Shogun 7, which is a product of ASX-listed tech company Atomos. The Shogun 7 delivers mind-blowing HDR monitoring, recording and playback and seamless multi-camera switching, which you'll see in action in the upcoming webinar. We'll now hand over to Steve McGovern and James Slaney. Steve is Managing Director and CEO of Dubba. James is one of the founders of Dubba and serves as its General Manager and Head of Product. Over to you guys.
Good morning and welcome to Dubba. What we'd like to do is give you an overview of the quarter and also the activities and leading into our strategy for the company as well for the next period. Been a busy quarter for us, as it has for most companies during the pandemic, and for us our focus was on building up our network of telecommunications service provider partners, which will explain why in the strategy and why that's important. And also, of course, building user numbers and revenues as well, and we were pretty successful in doing that. COVID-19, the pandemic, has actually had quite an impact on the company in a diverse way. We are actually a recording and data capture platform built specifically for telecommunications service providers, and in that sector some of the challenger providers have slowed down, particularly those who have SME bases, but then the larger players and some of our partners such as Cisco have seen huge step changes in terms of the requirement for the products that we're connected to, purely because of what's called business continuity planning, or BCP. So in a world where people don't work in offices anymore, they actually migrate to distributed workforce centres or home, etc. That suits the industry that we're connected to. That's where telecommunications itself is moving to, cloud communications, and we're a platform, a globally recognised platform that is the leader in terms of capturing that data, turning it, or capturing that voice, turning it into data and making it available. We'll show you a product demonstration later on as to how we've done that here in Australia for a client, a reference client. So in the quarter, we continue as we always do with our number one goal, which is to make sure that we connect to as many service provider networks globally as we can. And so we've been very successful today. We've been very lucky, particularly in North America, where we have most of the carriers under contract. We announced prior to the quarter that we just signed an agreement with Verizon, which is one of those, and we've seen developments in all the major carriers in the United States. We also touch on our relationship with Telstra today, where we have an impending go live wide availability launch imminently, and underpinning all of it is of course the business continuity planning uptake through our Cisco channel, where Dubba is actually the platform that's natively embedded into Cisco WebEx calling, which is Cisco's cloud communications platform. So between James and I, we'll take you through the figures and we'll take you through the initiatives as well. So what we'd like to do is just start off with the user numbers as well. The quarter saw a record growth for us of over 40,000 users for our core product, and most of this was driven by the work from home environment, but not necessarily as a direct result of orders coming in to be deployed. It's where service providers have seen the need to start packaging subscriptions or Dubba as a standard feature of their packages, and we've seen quite a bit of uptake there. Cisco, which is a major development initiative for us, to date, we see orders in the system in a very, very large amount, but there's a deployment process which can take 45, 60, up to 90 days for an average sized business and longer for something like a bank. And so our figures are largely without the Cisco impact, and given that that's the largest impact we've had in the company in the quarter, obviously it augurs well for the rest of for the new financial year. What I'd like to do is just hand over to James, and he'll give you a quick update as to where we're at with Telstra, and we have an impending launch with them.
Yep, so we've been working with Telstra for a fair time now. As most of you would be aware, we started engaging with talking about Telstra last year. There is an imminent general availability which we're very close to, and we're looking forward to that across the whole company. To date, we've actually seen some initial orders come in, and we're looking forward to an event in the coming weeks where it's a virtual sales event, obviously because of COVID, instead of their whole sales team getting together and doing a launch of all their new year and their new goals. They're doing a virtual event. We're expecting over like 500 attendees in this virtual event, and Dubba is one of the new products they're releasing to that channel, which is internal sales and all their resellers and their external channels as well. We're launching some marketing initiatives and some sales initiatives to really drive the Dubba service through their channel, and that's for the Tippet service, which is the unified communication service supplied by Telstra, the Liberate product, which is basically enabling native recording on mobile, which is really a national first in Australia, to better supply a unified call recording experience across mobile and I suppose desk phones, as you would say traditionally, and the Telstra SIP services, which is SIP Connect. So holistically, it's a very new product in Australia and really never been available before for businesses and for large and small businesses in Australia.
So the significance for us, as well as being obviously on home turf, is that it's a large mobile network with penetration into obviously a single country. Call recording, for example, it's the mobile call recording is the holy grail for financial services, and as we made a note in the quarterly report, we're actually engaged with 2 of the big 4 banks at the moment in running out trials on mobile call recording, and we'd hope that extends into many different user cases with those banks. It's not just about recording, of course, it's about AI. And so what we've also seen in the quarter, and we've seen it actually since the start of the calendar year, is that the appetite for artificial intelligence or insights, to actually a business to be able to use the data, whether it be for sentiment, for keywords, to drive workflow optimization, has never been so important. And whilst the user cases in financial services would obviously be around compliance and pattern matching and things like that, there's also, because of the pandemic, an appetite to understand how well your own staff are actually travelling as well. So things like sentiment analysis, etc., are coming to the fore. So the platform really sees its full expression in a mobile network. We are designed specifically for massive scale. That's our USP around the development and the philosophy and the design of the platform. That's why we're deployed by the telecommunications service providers that have agreed to take us ahead. We have 130 odd of those now as of the end of June, and we think that being available for Telstra mobile users in Australia will enable our shareholders and also our supporting businesses and partners to see the full value of what we're actually doing. Where this leads is it leads to really phase 2 of the Dubba picture. So phase 1 is we think that call recording is something that should be able to be switched on immediately as part of your telecommunications service. Phase 2 is that we genuinely believe that artificial intelligence or insights, whether it be transcription or some other outcomes that businesses are looking for, we think it will be a standard feature of every phone bundle going forward. How quickly will depend on the market, the individual carriers, but in the quarter we've taken great steps with a major US carrier who, as we wrote in the quarterly report, have started building us into their mobile network, which gives us enormous scope, not because they want call recording, because they want to be able to sell AI outcomes or widgets as they would call it, by capturing the voice and turning it into usable data.
So just adding to what Steve just said, then we're actually seeing some really good activity outside of Telstra in the local market. We're actually engaged with obviously Optus in the local market. We're looking to expand that relationship. They're doing a lot with Dubba at the moment. That includes such things like Vocus and MyNetPhone as well, doing things with Dubba presently in the local market. Globally, as Steve said, it's very encouraging to see a large mobile provider starting to do big movements towards connecting their network and activating their mobile network with Dubba, which is coming in the future. But as I think you all would know about AT&T and the existing providers, we're seeing big movements from the large providers during COVID. Some of the other smaller ones are maybe slowed down during COVID, but the larger ones are really active in trying to accelerate their growth and utilise their cloud services and connected with Dubba is connected to.
And so where this leads us to is at the moment to date, when you're trying to model the company, it's been fairly straightforward. We have a set of recording products. It has an average revenue per user just over $7 Australian. So you can pretty much times the number of users by $7, 23, 24, and you end up with our average recurring revenue, which has increased from 13.5 million to 16.1 million over the quarter. And things are about to change in terms of some of the commercial modelling for Dubba, and I think you'll see that in this quarter. And this is all linked into wide availability of AI or Dubba as a standard feature into some of the large telco providers. We call it Foundation. It's basically where a customer already has Dubba enabled for limited amounts of service, and then obviously we can take them down a path. And again, James will explain what's behind that philosophy.
So we believe that the Dubba platform has significant power behind it, and we've been running that network for many years with telcos, and as you may be aware, we've done significant testing with large providers such as AT&T. What we're looking to do is utilise the power of the network, which we've got deployed globally and into 80 plus connected networks, and there's over 130 I think that are signed up and looking to utilise Dubba. With the foundation strategy and the way we're looking to enhance our relationship models we've got with telcos, enabling us to really assist them with their go-to-market, their marketing of Dubba services through their channels into their existing user bases, and to help with conversion of users through the applications and the integrations we've got with their networks. Over 90% of the providers we work with have done automated provisioning into our network, and we're looking to enhance that to drive the penetration of Dubba services into those existing bases and their new customers as they get switched on.
So we think there are user cases which might not be apparent to date, but for everyone, whether it be enterprise through to even consumer customers. Where we're seeing traction at the moment is in places that we really didn't foresee as quickly as it's coming. So it's enterprise customers through Cisco is really a major initiative of the company at the moment, where we're putting a lot of our resources. And the process with Cisco is that we still have to do quite a bit of work directly with the end users. If it's a large bank, for example, they do have information security requirements that we need to complete documentation, etc. And that slows down, if you like, the availability time. But I think that the volume of orders that are actually in the system, and it's a prescribed system, puts the company in a situation for the first time where it can predictably look at the next 2 quarters and understand what the basic outcome is before we start even going into those quarters. So we're really comfortable and excited about where the next 2 quarters are from a base level on what we can see right now. A couple of other items in the quarter. We concluded an acquisition of a company called Call-N, which is an Australian call recording company. They actually used to be owned by a division of Telstra, and with that company comes some users, obviously some revenues. We got some economies of scale out, so it's accretive to the business, and it also has some interesting internal and billing relationships with Telstra. So the benefit of that transaction will obviously be seen in the current quarter. Also, right at the start of the quarter, we conducted a $10 million placement with Morgan's Corporate, and it was a very, very well supported raise. We did it for one reason, and that was because at the time there was enormous uncertainty, similar to what we're actually seeing today in Melbourne, but across the country and across the globe back at the start of April. And we wanted to give certainty to our employees and to all our stakeholders, whether it be shareholders, our telco partners who wanted to know that we were still there if they wanted to do campaigns. And I think in terms of seeing the company through at an operational level through the pandemic, we're really pleased we did that raise. It wasn't a huge amount of money. It does put the company in a good position. We've got $18.5 million worth of cash at the bank at the end of June, so we're well set from that perspective. But I think what it did was it showed everyone that we're going forward at a time when there is significant disruption and uncertainty. So what we'd like to do is...
do you want a Cisco update?
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to do it?
No, yeah, so it's just... so in regards to Cisco, we now, you can now buy Dubba subscriptions through, or Cisco channel can buy Dubba subscriptions through the Cisco procurement service, which is called Cisco Commerce Web, or CCW as we talk about it. That means that if the channel then can want to sell call recording for WebEx calling or other Cisco products, they can buy Dubba through that method. We have seen some initial orders come through that, and we're getting exposed to the opportunity in the pipeline with that. We're seeing large opportunities with banks and financial institutions globally, businesses that have had to adapt to the COVID pandemic and so decentralise their workforce. And we're getting a really good exposure to the channel. It's encouraging to see how much contact and sales engagement we're having with the channel and Cisco people themselves. But you might have already seen a demo of Dubba previously. So what you're looking at the moment is the Dubba application. You're seeing as a normal user logging in. You've got to think about that this is a platform that is running globally. It's does recording locally and storage locally, databases local, so it accommodates all the requirements of regulatory requirements. The user then gets the ability to log in and actually access the data through their own portal. As they log in, they can see the recordings that are appropriate to them. As you can see probably on the demonstration, a user going in as access a recording, playback a recording as they're permitted to do that. They've got various controls and they can download, delete, and everything you'd expect about call recording. You've got to think about that Dubba is one platform running in Australia, the US, but it's globally connected. That means that as we're connected, such as the example of Telstra, a user or a business can record every call or every bit of data across their whole business and centralise into one application. That's not possible today through any other call recording or voice capture service today. As you can see there, we can access AI, which we're releasing more functionality there into insights on voice. You can see that there's ability to find recordings based on a word and then search for that recording based on a word, see sentiment and playback and find calls based on that. What you also can see is that we also now have released the ability to do automatic triggers or notifications based on content of the AI that's been produced by Dubba. What's happening is we're recording the phone call, transcribing that call, and looking for key bits of data that is appropriate to the customer. In the situation that's in the demonstration, there's been a word that's been spoken, and we're seeing an automatic notification to the customer based on that word. So this helps in a financial institution looking for regulatory requirements. We presented that not long ago to I think a bank in Australia, and the security compliance officer said to us that this would revolutionise the way that their business operates across the whole bank. You're also probably seeing the end there, I've probably spoken too long, some dashboards. What we're doing with those dashboards is we're actually representing the data of Dubba, bringing that out into a business intelligence tool called a BI tool. And as you can see there, we're doing basic reporting on call recordings. We're doing dashboarding based on topics of phone calls and automatic categorization of phone calls. In the demonstration, this is for an insurance business. This is live data that we've anonymized for the demonstration. And what you can see there is we're actually looking for categories of all their phone calls. In this business, we've automatically categorized every call and the topics that relate to those calls. So now a business such as an insurance firm can actually see how many calls they're getting for claims and know exactly across 100% of those calls what the calls are about. Currently, in large enterprises, we've been told they're really only sampling sometimes only 1% of their phone calls, and at maximum maybe 15% of their calls. Because Dubba is this platform that's connected to the core and native to the telco network, we can record at scale, capture that data and produce AI across the whole business, and they can get reports and data as you can see in the demonstration. Okay,
so I think we're going to take some questions. Before we do that, what's next for Dubba? More of the same in some ways, in that our number one focus is definitely over the next 2 or 3 years to secure our position but across as many telco networks as possible, and also deep into those networks as well. At the end of the day, that creates network effect. It means that you can have service with one provider for your fixed line, if you like, and another one for your mobile, and still be able to use Dubba across both of them. And it means that if you have an expectation level around some of the features that a telco is providing, And particularly if you think of something as simple as transcription, you know, we don't think it's too long before you expect transcription or notifications based on what was said in the call to be as available as voicemail is today on mobiles. And so the whole plan for Dubba was really to put ourselves in a position whereby we're embedded into those telecommunications networks. Once we're in there, it's difficult for us to see how we would ever come out once customers start connecting the data up into their own dashboards, their own workflow. Going into the large carriers is not trivial. There are significant barriers to entry. I think AT&T tested us for 18 months at record pace in terms of the amount of recordings they were testing on a daily basis. So it's not a trivial deployment for a large carrier, and they do actually make sustainable plans around it. So I think with regards to sustainable plans, what we're seeing more than anything though when we come down to the actual granular level of users is we're seeing that large enterprises, medium-sized businesses are now bringing their business continuity plans that may have been there 2 years out on their roadmap. They're bringing them today because they need to distribute technology that enables their workforce to work from home in the same way they would, for example, if they're in a contact center. So we're seeing the orders in the Cisco system. They'll filter through into deployments in the next 2 quarters, but we're seeing that with our larger telco partners as well, and we expect more of the same. So that's really, I guess, the outlook for Dubba as well, and also a quick update on the quarter.
Thank you very much, Steve and James, for that wonderful presentation. You went into great detail there. I'd like to just strip it back a little bit and maybe drill into the numbers a little bit more. So we've had a few questions come through about that. What was the subscriber growth for Dubba in July in particular?
July, we don't actually have the numbers, but in terms of, I don't have a definitive number, but it's continuation of what we saw in June. We would expect the user numbers to at least maintain their current growth rate. We'd expect them actually to be significantly higher than that for the rest of the year, again off the back of the fact that we know what's in the pipeline for Cisco, because there's a defined process over 3 to 4 months in terms of order to deployment, and we can predict that now. And really, the user numbers for the June quarter didn't include most of those, hardly any of those sales.
So on that note of Cisco, the 40,000 user number, has there been a contribution to that from Cisco yet, or are we still yet to see that actually come into the figure?
To the actual users going live, there's been minimal amounts of Cisco sales in there. If I tell you the orders that we've taken from customers, the majority of them are Cisco orders. So that'll give you an idea around, I guess, the diversity. Business as usual, really, for the 40,000. There were some unusual events in terms of, I think I mentioned earlier, a couple of service providers decided that they wanted to bundle our service into some of their plans, so that got us a bulk amount of users on a couple of our service providers. But really, in terms of the end users driving large volumes, such as banks would engage with banks in Canada, America, Italy, etc. They're all actually in the process of being deployed, and some of them, just to be really clear, if we take an order for a bank for 10,000 users, for argument's sake, we'd expect 5,000 of them or thereabouts to be deployed instantly, within 3 to 4 months, and the balance really deployed over a period of 6, 9, 12 months as the bank actually moves its infrastructure to the, in this case, Cisco WebEx calling. So we do need them to take that telephony platform that we're embedded into, and when a bank's considering new infrastructure, it does get rolled out over a period.
We had a question come through towards the end from a viewer that was quite technical. It's a 2 or 3 part question. If you could please explain the relationship between new customers and revenue based on your December 19 half-year accounts. Gross margin looks to be about 30%. They've used service income and direct costs for that. Number 1, what's the upper limit of gross margin percentage? If you could perhaps address that, and then there's a second part to the question.
Yeah, okay. Well, there wouldn't be many CEOs talking about gross margin in an investor call down to the nth degree. But I think in general terms, one of the advantages of what we do as a business is that we have great operating leverage. So, In order to actually scale in Australia, for example, we can handle at the moment instantly anything up to 400,000 users. The cost for that is defined, and it's the margins are above 90% on that. So I think without going into the actual details themselves, the ability for us to scale on a sort of field of dreams exercise whereby we have a platform that's ready to go. It can get filled in, if you like, by Telstra users or Optus users, and the operating leverage and the margins in that are quite substantial.
And just to add to that, the more we grow in a region, the more the margins actually increase. So the benefit of the elastic scale and the scalability of the platform increases.
So I'm thinking it might be hard to stake a real clear claim with this one. How long until gross margin gets closer to that upper limit than its current level was the second part of the question.
Well, there is no upper limit. So if you think about a mobile network in the US that might have tens of millions of users, in theory and in practice, they could switch them all on, and we would be able to cope with that. That's really the essence of what the platform does. And as James says, the more users we have, the greater the margins are. So really, whilst we might have a defined potential user base in Australia because of the population, one of the reasons why we operate out of Atlanta and out of Dallas and spend quite a bit of our resources in the US is because the market there is enormous. The appetite is enormous, not just for call recording, but for all the artificial intelligence outcomes as well. And when we talk about the margins in relation to these questions, we're really just talking about call recording at the moment. People pay for content, and I think one of the things that really is an interesting message for us with our partners who are focused on utility and connectivity is we're actually turning that connectivity and that utility into content. And so it's quite interesting really, because we have an average revenue per user to Dubba on a wholesale level of about $7, $7.50. But once you actually start doing things with the data and providing value into business intelligence tools, etc., then you're in a world where it depends on the level of content that you're providing and people are prepared to pay for it. So that really, I think, is the future for us over the next 12 months. You'll start to see some of that coming through.
Thanks very much for joining us today, Steve and James. That was wonderful to hear from you. Up next, in a few minutes, we have a company that is potentially looking to list on the ASX Credit Clear. Head to the website to register for the session or click the link in the chat box that's just popped up. Thank you.